Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you on February 14th. It's a Tuesday, it's 2:30 in the afternoon, Valentine's Day. And while I do wish and hope that everyone is with someone that they love, in many places around the world, that is just not possible. In fact, in the Syrian-Turkey border, northeast portion of Syria, we know many people are having a very difficult time with the earthquake that has just struck. There are some 40,000 people that have been injured, but that is only the tip of an iceberg of a bigger problem, one that is political, one is militaristic, and many questions exist. We want to address that briefly with you. But first, we do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we want to welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out across all the social media that we can to be able to hear what you have to say about the issues that affect us all, to hear your voices as an expression of the First Amendment. Free speech. It's not just an American issue. It's everyone should be able to speak about the issues that affect you across the globe. And you can reach us through your tweets, your chats, and your phone calls every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do hope you will join us to talk about this and other issues. The earthquake in Syria and Turkey is obviously a very big deal. We know that depending on the report you're looking at, exactly somewhere between 35 and 40,000 people have died. There have been a couple of miracles recently where individuals, a young woman, a young girl, have been found and saved, and that is good news. We're happy to hear about that. In looking over that news, we haven't talked about it a lot in this channel. There's not much you can say about a natural disaster, especially one of such magnitude, besides our heartfelt sorrow that it has occurred, that so many lives have been affected, and our desire to see many, many people helped. In fact, looking at the U.S., we were happy to see the news that was reported in The Guardian just 4 days ago that the United States has announced a 180-day exemption to Syrian sanctions for disaster aid. And that's a good thing. That's very important, that the United States has temporarily eased its sanctions on Syria in an effort to speed up aid deliveries in the northwest to be able to help people. Obviously, this includes the Kurds, U.S. allies in the war against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban. Part of our efforts in Iraq and in Syria to curb terrorism around the world. And obviously something that we've been fighting in quite some time, for over a decade in Syria, in trying to help people with the Syrian civil war. And that's actually what kind of caught our attention about this, why we wanted to go back over this. Because why is the United States still sanctioning Syria? What's happening in Syria? It's an issue that's very important. And we know that at this moment, once the earthquake took place, the Syrian government, which has long been in a civil war with its own people, and many other nations, including Russia, Iran, the United States, Israel, all being involved, including various terrorist organizations, the Syrian government opened up its doors and said they would not only accept help for themselves, but for all of the different regional organizations that are waging war, all simultaneously in Syria. Now, this is, of course, good news for the Kurds. They are allies of the United States. They have supported us for decades in our efforts, and we have supported them with varying levels of support, which has been diminishing under the Obama and now the Biden administrations, but still they are our allies there to some extent. The problem is, what's happening there? When was the last time that you heard about Syria? And again, when we heard about the aid and the sanctions being lifted, the need So great that even in the middle of a civil war, the Syrian government is saying they will accept help and they will make sure everyone is helped, regardless of their position in the fighting. That's their statement. We have to ask, but why is the United States continuing its sanctions? Why are we still there? What is happening there? See, the last time that we actually heard about Syria was back on January 21st of 2021. And it was at that time that we had mentioned to everyone, the day after Joe Biden had taken the executive office, that he initially doubled the amount of U.S. troops in Syria. He doubled the exposure of the United States in a Syrian conflict, in a civil war that many say we don't have any place to be in. He increased the number of troops to about 2,500 troops, 900 specifically in Syria itself, working along with the Kurds. What happened to them? What has been happening there? Well, we did continue to follow that up, and in fact, we were talking about that over a year ago. We were talking about the airstrikes that were going on in Syria and our battles with Iranian-backed terrorist organizations, and nothing seemed to happen. Now, we have long stated that the Biden administration, they have no plan for international policy. There is no endgame in sight. We have never seen any description of what is the objective. What are we to gain? We just know that we are continuing to fight. And as much as, obviously, Afghanistan took the attention of the American people away from Iraq and away from Syria, that didn't end our time there. Even as Joe Biden abandoned 5,000 Americans in Afghanistan to this day and ignores the region and stops speaking about it, we see that the U.S. and in part the world stopped talking about that portion of the Middle East. Stop talking about the Syrian civil war, the Kurds, U.S. troops' involvement there. In fact, it was most recently we see that Business Insider was speaking about this back on September 4th of 2022, one of the few major news media outlets that actually even mentioned Syria or the fact that U.S. troops are in Syria. And they were talking about some of our locations in Syria. The fact is, the United States continues to be in Syria for many reasons, most of them not very good, especially since Syria is winning. The United States backed troops and the Kurds, they're losing. They are losing that war. And thus our investment for decades has basically gone away. We've lost that investment as we are losing the territory, depending on which source you're looking at, either very quickly or very slowly. But one of the reasons why we maintain our presence is now, today in 2023, is because of the troop presence of Russians. That this was part of Joe Biden's war against Russia, the proxy war that we have been using the Ukraine for, that in having U.S. troops maintain their position in Syria, well, that has kept Russian troops in Syria in the conflict and taking them away from the Ukraine. Okay, that makes some sense to a certain degree, but why are we in Syria? Joe Biden doubled our presence. He has maintained that presence. Is that actually in our best advantage? In fact, there are some on the internet who have been asking, why are we there? Ending the Syrian war, get U.S. troops out, lift the sanctions, because the Syrians are winning anyway. Is that really in our best interest? That's a really, really important question to ask. Is it worth fighting in a Syrian civil war where the United States has no benefit? We have no end game, no goal, no return on our investment. It's exactly like what we're seeing in the Ukraine. We're in the middle of a proxy war, which is helping the Russian economy, but it is hurting everyone else. And there is no end in sight. And even if the U.S. were to win in the Ukraine, We're never getting back the hundreds of billions of dollars that we have committed and are looking to continue to commit. In Syria, we have no end in sight. There is no benefit, other than, of course, to protect the Kurds, but we've been trying to protect them for some time. They're not going to get their own state. Turkey won't allow it. Syria won't allow it. Iraq won't allow it. It's a very difficult thing to look at. It's a very tricky process. In fact, the world has noticed this quagmire that we find ourselves in, and noting that so far the Biden administration has simply maintained the status quo, observed by the Atlantic Council's Abdulrahman al-Masiri. Quote, the U.S. does not know what it wants in Syria and has no coherent endgame. And that isn't likely to change given the dramatic shift in priorities of the U.S. foreign policy agenda and acute lack of safe options for a re-engagement in Syria. So essentially, our position has not changed from 2021. Joe Biden increased the number of troops without any fanfare from the American public or the news media. It was very low key. And we had no idea why he was doing that. Today, we have no idea why we have maintained those troops at these levels or what they are doing. And it gets even more complicated when we find out that Russia has since withdrawn their combat forces in Syria, which means that they've been focusing more on the Ukraine and shifting their emphasis. While they are still in Syria, they are far less in Syria. And quote, and I'm quoting military.com, the dynamics in Syria will change as Russia continues to get overburdened with the Ukraine. So what might not have been possible in the past, like some sort of negotiated outcome, could become possible in the future, or it might not. Now, that article is from November 2nd of 2022. The fact is, here it is in February of 2023, and it hasn't changed. The United States still has troops that are well under fire. As we learned just on January 20th of 2023, drone attack hits U.S.-led coalition base in Syria, that the United States troops are under fire, that we have retained a facility, a base in Syria, which was led by Kurdish forces, but U.S. troops, hundreds of U.S. troops are there, and they are being attacked. Luckily, the attack that happened in January did not cost any U.S. lives, or in fact any lives at that time, but yet we're still there. Most recently, looking at news from February 2nd, there is the belief at this time that the U.S. military is ramping up its operations against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, that ISIS is growing its forces and the U.S. is growing its forces as a reaction to fight against these terrorists in Iraq and Syria, to help the Kurds, but also to end the threat that we see coming from ISIS and other terrorist groups. That's fantastic. And to quote, as it stands, ISIS continues to wage an insurgency in both Iraq and Syria thanks to small cells located in rural and enclaves that mostly mount drive-by attacks on security forces between the occasional urban terror attack, according to the most recent Pentagon Inspector General report for OIR. The report detailed multiple factors outside the control of the United States military that make the enduring defeat of ISIS a near impossible prospect, including local political and socioeconomic instability, environments that allow extremist groups to operate, and the meddling of third-party actors like Iran and Russia, and even NATO's ally Turkey, that prevent the U.S. and coalition forces from focusing on the defeat ISIS mission. So the Pentagon is aware we are in a no-win situation. The Biden-Harris administration is aware we're in a no-win situation. International news knows that the United States is in a no-win scenario, and that the people of Syria have not benefited from the U.S. being involved, that the United States people have not benefited. In fact, it's created more conflict with one of our allies, Turkey. Why is there no news on this? I have to speculate. And I understand we want to go and help all these groups to live through the earthquake that is affecting them right now. But there is a bigger picture on top of that. Part of the reason why it's so difficult to help those people is this ongoing war that gets no attention. The news media will not speak about Syria, just as they will not speak about the Americans abandoned by the Biden-Harris administration for well over a year now. They just won't talk about it. It's a conversation you can't have. We're not supposed to remember that there are ongoing conflicts in Iraq and Syria, that there are Americans that have been abandoned now in Afghanistan and the Ukraine, that the Biden-Harris administration has no international policy, and that because of that lack of international policy, we are seeing conflicts grow all throughout the world. We have said on this channel many times that the fear should not be World War III, but in fact, 3 regional wars. We have seen, and we are continuing to see, the conflict in Europe with the proxy economic war of the Ukraine, which is escalating, and we believe will lead to a Vietnam-like situation in which U.S. advisors will be sent in, and then we will see additional troops continue to flock in to protect those who are there to protect our assets. But then there is also Southeast Asia, which we have spoken a lot about over in 2022, as the conflict from North Korea has escalated the situation with over 90 missiles and ICBMs, and now the realization that North Korea has the capability, even through the United States defenses, to strike U.S. soil with a nuclear weapon, something that has only recently come to light in the last week. And obviously, Japan and South Korea have recognized this threat not only to the United States, but to themselves directly, which is why Japan is building its own military, why South Korea has threatened the United States that they will make nuclear weapons if the United States does not give them nuclear weapons. And of course, there's still the tensions of China guaranteeing that they will use force to take over Taiwan at some point relatively soon. So those are 2 of the 3 regions we have spoken about since 2021, saying that there is going to be regional wars. The Middle East has been a problem. We have long been talking about Iran and its contributions to these conflicts, whether it be the fact that Iran is shipping out weapons to Houthi rebels in Yemen to increase the civil war there, that they are backing they are the largest benefactor of international terror groups in the world, and that the Iran nuclear deal, when it existed and if it were to exist again, will help fund international global terror. But they are also actively helping Russia and China in their conflicts because they hate the United States and Israel and Europe. But now we also see that they are continuing their efforts in Syria. Also, not something that the United States needs or wants to deal with. But that is increasing. The Middle East is becoming even more of an escalation. It is continuing to increase, with Iran building more and more ballistic missiles, building up its military, and continuing to encourage conflicts around the world, especially in the Middle East. We need leadership to deal with this. It is the lack of leadership, it is the lack of a plan, a coherent plan, that is allowing each of these nations, each of these regions, to grow into greater areas of conflict. And Syria is perhaps one of the best examples of that. Over the last 2 years, we have no plan. We have no guidance, no guideline. All we know and all we see are that U.S. troops are in harm's way. They are being attacked on a regular basis. No one knows why we are there or what we are trying to achieve. We just know that we are in war. We are in war because the Biden-Harris administration wants us to be in that war. Yes, we want to help people in need in natural disasters anywhere in the world. The United States is the most generous nation in the world on an individual level as well as a government. And that should not ever end. But at the same time, we are looking at a situation where the lack of leadership on an international level has made the world see the United States as being weak and rudderless, that we have no coherent plans, that both our allies and our enemies cannot understand. We have no understanding of what we are doing, and we have a news media that is actively making sure that the American people are ignorant of what is happening. On this channel, we have tried to follow all of these threads, and we have done a pretty good job, we think. Now, sadly, we have fallen a bit on our coverage of Syria, but there is no coverage of Syria to speak about. There is nothing to delve more information on. We need our elected officials, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Conservatives, Progressives. We need those who are in elected office to tell us what is the plan, to tell our allies, the Kurds, what is the plan, to let the other world nations know what is our plan, what is our end game, to show that we have leadership and that we are not just rolling the dice and playing politics, which I believe is the main factor why we haven't heard about what's happening in Syria or Iraq, why we have Americans abandoned in nations across this world, why we are seeing international tensions increase, which are endangering the lives of not just U.S. soldiers, but U.S. citizens, both internationally and domestically, and of course, destroying our confidence our allies have in us and our capabilities and our treaties. We need to say, as an example, and use Syria as an example of our leadership to create a plan that includes an end game so that everyone knows what is happening. The Kurds would love to hear that. Turkey would love to hear that. Iran and Russia and China fear hearing that. I know most Americans don't pay attention to international policy. Most Americans aren't following the three major regions where conflict is increasing and escalating. But we do. And we hope that this small segment is able to make you more aware of why this is important. Yes, we're going to give international aid. We are releasing some of the sanctions over the next 180 days, and people need the help. Absolutely. And then what happens? And after that, U.S. troops will remain in Syria, fighting a war that we are losing for a reason no one understands. Our allies are endangered, and they have lost confidence. We need better. We can't keep doing this. And we hope that in a year, in 2 years, we will not be coming back to tell you about an update in Syria that says nothing has changed, that we are continuing to be involved in a civil war of a foreign country for no reason that is discernible, that we have endangered American troops in their lives for no understandable reason, that we continue to show weakness to our enemies, especially in the most volatile region of the world, in the Middle East, that has encouraged them to continue to endanger the lives of not only Israel, our allies, not only the Kurds, our allies, not only angering our allies in Turkey and endangering the lives in our allies in NATO and Southeast Asia, but American citizens both internationally and domestically. We don't want to have that happen. And we hope the leadership, even from this small channel, are able to pay attention and to say, we need a plan. We need to demonstrate leadership. We hope they will hear us. We hope they will act on this, regardless of whatever the political outcome may be, whether it be from war hawks or peace doves, whether it's from Republicans or progressives, that the Biden administration, instead of playing politics and trying to win the next election, decides to protect our troops and our people and our allies and make a decisive plan. Whether that's to win or to leave in an organized manner does not matter. Perhaps you don't care about Syria. Perhaps you're not paying attention to this conflict. Maybe it's not on the top of your mind. We hope that you will take some time to think about this. And whether you agree with us or not, we look forward to hearing your comments about this and whether or not you would want to see the leadership in Congress, in the Senate, in the White House to make a decision. What do you prefer? Should we win the Syrian civil war? Should we be in the Syrian civil war? Should we remove our troops and our Kurdish allies? What steps should be next? Or should we just continue to exist there, endangering so many lives and showing weakness for years and perhaps decades to come? I look forward to hearing your answer, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us today.